Hey guys, what's up? Welcome back to the channel. It's Synicalex. And before we get into this video, I just want to thank you guys. The House of X Powers of 10 sneak peek video has already kicked off with almost 15,000 views in just a few short hours. You are monsters. You're amazing. Thank you so much for the support. With that being said, I can tell that a lot of you are excited, as I am very hyped for this update. We are the first Marvel game, pretty much period, I think, to get any kind of update, any kind of content regarding House of X Powers of 10. Maybe Ultimate Alliance 3 has like a uniform or something like that that's sort of an homage or hinting at this kind of stuff, but no other game, and especially none of the other mobile games, have gotten full-on content from this series. And this series is huge for a lot of different reasons. So I want to do something unusual, something unique, something that I don't usually do. Stop looking at me, Baron Mordo, you creepy dude. I want to basically give you guys a summary, a synopsis of the comics. The comics being House of X Powers of 10. It's 12 total comics, 6 series for House of X, 6 series for Powers of 10. They're sort of intertwined, so you have to read them kind of back and forth simultaneously, and they tell you more than one really amazing story, and that is what the update is based on. So not only by watching this video will you have a synopsis of these comics, then you can go and read them for all of the more beautiful details that I just don't have time to give you, on top of the amazing artwork and the words and the scripting and stuff like that. But you will also have a better idea of what to expect from the update, because my guess is, it would be crazy if not, the devs read these, at least some of these issues, before making the characters, making the uniforms, making whatever possible, fingers crossed, whatever possible content, game modes might be coming with this update. So, what's the big deal? You've probably heard people talking about it. What's the big deal about House of X and Powers of 10? Well, it's basically a reboot, and it's basically the new foundation for the X-Men. Everything else is being kind of, I don't know if it's being forgotten or being just chucked away, but this is the new foundation for everything moving forward for the X-Men universe. They're not making sweeping changes to like the powers of characters or the names or the looks necessarily. None of that stuff. You know, you're still gonna recognize, oh, that's Wolverine, that's Magneto, etc. But everything else is basically everything but the characters. The setting and the story is changing. They still reference old stuff like Genosha and all that, those conflicts. But this new stuff is basically repainting the entire, I don't know what it's called, mural of the X-Men. So because this is a new foundation for the X-Men story-wise, this is a really good entry point if you are brand new to comics, or if you're just a casual reader who hasn't read comics in a while and you don't even know that much about the X-Men. You honestly don't need to know anything. I mean, it helps to know a little bit about their powers. You might be confused. Wolverine, you're like, what the hell is that? Yeah, you know, Professor X does this, and then someone starts drooling. You don't really understand why. So yeah, it would help a little bit to know their powers, but you do not need to read any prior X-Men novel, like, you know, omnibuses or series in order to understand this. That's what makes this so good. It's a refresh, it's a restart, and it stands on its own, and it's a really good story to boot. So if you are a fan of the X-Men, I have to say you should try not to miss this. And actually, I believe the omnibus, which is the entire 12 issues put together as one hardcover, is already on sale. I actually checked it. It's about $60 or $65 Canadian for 12 issues in a hardcover book. Looks really nice. It's red, and it flips through beautiful pages, actually larger than the ones in the comics. So you can probably check that out as well if you want like the whole thing encapsulated without having to buy 12 separate comic issues. So basically the way that it works is House of X tells you the story as it's happening in the present time. There is time jumps. There's a lot of time jumps actually, which can be confusing. So you think about it this way. House of X tells you the story of how Professor X is sort of creating a new world, a new identity, a new place for the X-Men. He's Neil Armstrong landing on the moon, putting that flag in, except it's not on the moon, it's on Earth. And it's not a flag, it's Krakoa, and it's not humans on space or humans in space on the moon, it's mutants on Earth. So it's an okay analogy. Powers of 10 is a little bit different, and as you can see, it looks a little bit different. It's, you know, it's got a lot of colors, you got a lot of weird stuff going on, you got a lot of unrecognizable characters. Powers of 10 deals with how House of X comes to be. It kind of explains where all the knowledge and all the people come into play in the past, present, and future. It's insane. Now, before we go any further, I should have mentioned this at the start of the video, but I didn't. This is why I'm not good at this kind of stuff. This will contain spoilers, obviously. So this is a synopsis. I'm not going to try and spoil everything for you, but I'm also not going to try and spoil nothing for you. I'm just going to give you the most important pieces of information that I think are the coolest and the most interesting to, you know, get your imagination going, get you excited for the update. And also, if you want to read this, because I think comics are beautiful and not enough people read them anymore. So it'd be awesome if I inspire at least some people to read comics. Not that I read enough of them myself, but, you know, we do what we can. So yeah, there are going to be spoilers. It's unavoidable. I've probably already given you spoilers somehow, but I'm not doing it on purpose, and you've been warned. So powers of 10, which is why it's so it can be so confusing, goes into the past, present, and the future. The future is where you're going to see things, you know, machines, you know, robots, whatever you want to call them, like Nimrod. So Nimrod is going to become important later, but to be honest, Nimrod is not really an important player in this series. The Sentinels aren't really an important player either. This just kind of like the threat. It's more the threat of Nimrods, the threat of Sentinels, or, you know, Omega Sentinels, the threat of humans and machines working together or working separately to kill mutants. That is essentially, that's pretty much always the conflict in X-Men novels and in X-Men comics, but that's basically what's going on here. And so essentially what happens is the one huge change that they make is that they give Moira McTaggart, I think it's her, they changed her last name, maybe not. Anyways, they give Moira, who is like, you know, kind of like a love interest of Professor X, they give her new powers. She doesn't, I don't think she has mutant powers in any of the past comics. I think she just has a way of sort of understanding mutant abilities, which could be considered a power. I don't know, but it's not that important. But essentially what they do with this new series is they give Moira this kind of resurrection ability. And what the resurrection ability does is that when she dies, it's kind of like Groundhog Day. It's kind of like Groundhog Day for your life. So she's born in 1970. She lives her life until whatever, 2040. She dies, and then she's reborn in 1970 again, but she has all of her past life's information. So this is the vehicle that the story drives through in order to push the mutants way further ahead so that they can sort of cement their place and their legacy in the world, you know, sort of adjacent to humanity. Because, you know, for better or for worse, mutants are the evolution of humans. And so, you know, having them as you know, instead of being adversaries, have them trying to sort of take over the world, whether it's peacefully or otherwise, has also been one of the main themes of, you know, X-Men comics. On the one hand, Professor X wants to live, you know, wants to cohabitate with humans, but recognizes that he is kind of, you know, they are above humans. They're sort of better than humans. They need special schools, etc. Whereas Magneto is more like, nah, screw this. We're going to kill mutants and we're going to rule this world. So they have to, you know, find a peaceful compromise between that. And they use Moira's information that she basically gets over lifetimes and lifetimes to do so, because every time she lives, after the first couple of times, after the first few lifetimes, she tries to help Professor X and help the mutants sort of overcome their extinction, overcome being destroyed by Sentinels, overcome being destroyed by Nimrods or whatever. And every time she tries a different path, she fails. But every time she dies, she gets to come back and try again. So it's this really cool sort of exponential knowledge coming into play, and it's this really cool moments in the story where Moira basically meets Professor X and you know, shares what she's seen with him. And it's this scene here, and it's beautiful. And she basically says, you know, I've met you before, because he doesn't know who she is, because this is the first time they're meeting. This is a brand new story. They're you know, starting right again from the beginning with the X-Men. And she basically says, why don't you read my mind and find out? And then he's like, oh, snap. And he sees all of her lives, and he sees himself, and he sees the X-Men, and he sees Magneto, and he sees them trying all of these different things to succeed, to not die, to not become extinct, and they keep failing. So that's Powers of X, and it goes, you know, backwards in time, forwards in times. She goes back and she chills with Apocalypse. She goes to Magneto, yada, yada, yada. They go forwards in time, and they bring up all this new stuff with, like, Technarchy, and they talk about there's kind of some weird stuff in the future regarding like gigantic sentient machine existence, and it's like the size of it's like a black hole. It's pretty interesting. It's this kind of stuff here. It's the Ascension. It's a bit weird, but I want to focus more on the main story. So essentially what happens is they finally come up with a plan that they think is going to work, and we don't know the end result. We know that it kind of does work, but the end result essentially involves them creating an island as their home called Krakoa. And this is a glimpse at Krakoa, and it's just this giant living island that actually has roots a long time ago in the comics. It's not something that Jonathan Hickman made up. And essentially Krakoa allows them to do like a whole bunch of different things. It's one of the other vehicles with which the story moves forward. In terms of knowledge and in terms of, you know, rewriting their mistakes and kind of rewriting history, Moira does that with her mutant power and kind of, you know, relaying that information constantly and again and again and again to Professor X, to Xavier. And then on the other hand, Krakoa allows them to sort of create a different stance with humanity, because Krakoa, the island, can produce these flowers, and the flowers have specific effects on mutants, but for humans they're like amazing drugs. Not like bad kind of, not mind-altering drugs, but drugs that extend your life, drugs that get rid of all mental illness and any sort of like dementia or some Alzheimer's, something like that. And then there's another drug that does something else for humans. So these are like miracle drugs. And so they use these miracle drugs on top of their own leverage as basically gods to humans. Like no human in the world could kill Magneto one-on-one. They use these things as leverage to create their own sovereign nation. So they're going all government, they're going all like legit. They're basically, it's like the mafia going legit finally. And so what they do is they, you know, make all these moves politically and, you know, economically, and Professor X at one point sends a message to everyone in the world explaining what Krakoa is, that it's a place only for mutants. All mutants are welcome. There will be mutant law that mutants will be judged based on. Mutants won't be judged by human laws anymore. And so if a mutant does something wrong, let's say in New York or Toronto, they will be taken to Krakoa for judgment. And he even creates a council. This is Krakoa in the Pacific. It's over here on this map of the world. He even creates a council called the Quiet Council to oversee these decisions. And you've got characters like Apocalypse, Mr. Sinister, Jean Grey, Magneto, Mystique, all sitting on this council making decisions for all mutant kind. So it's a really cool, very modern take on the X-Men, where as opposed to having these sort of factions of characters where, you know, you've got Professor X and his X-Men, you've got Apocalypse and his riders and his what are they called? Riders of the Apocalypse, I can't remember, the Four Horsemen. You've got, you know, Mr. Sinister and his DNA thing. Rather than having all these separate factions, you got the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. They're all kind of working together as one. Now, we'll obviously have to wait and see in future comic runs. There's Dawn of X that comes out after this 12-issue run is over. We'll have to see if that piece obviously holds. I eventually assume there will be conflict within and amongst mutants, but for now, the conflict exists with mutants trying to tackle the problem of both evolving humans that want to eliminate them and evolving machines that want to eliminate them. So honestly, guys, if I haven't convinced you yet, I'll try one more time. Definitely get your hands on House of X, Powers of X. It is absolutely amazing. This video cannot do it justice. I gave you a really, really brief synopsis of what to expect. There's a little bit of confusing parts with time travel, but if you have any questions, you can definitely look up much more detailed videos. I know Comicstorian Comics Explained did like a 2.5 hour video where he explains the entire story from top to bottom. So you can definitely find way more information on that. A lot of people are really enjoying this, so hopefully you will too. And not to mention the artwork is beautiful, and I cannot wait to see. Hopefully we get a part 2. Hopefully there's more than one update based around House of X, Powers of 10. But I cannot wait to see what Marvel Future Fight has in store for us with this update. So with that being said, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.